Hello everyone, welcome to the series summarizing the novel Lord of the Mysteries on the AniMonolith channel. In continuation of previous parts, Klein refines his mystical practices by creating an incantation referring to himself that allows communication with the Hanged Man and Justice through magical rituals. He navigates the challenges of crafting a ritual that won't expose his identity or pose a danger to participants, finally settling on an incantation referring to himself and not the person who brought him into this world. He practices and initiates the gathering earlier than usual, confirming its stability. During the gathering, Klein examines Justice and the Hanged Man using spirit vision and observes mystical constellations tied to their abilities, including Giant Dragon and Storms. Klein also realizes the Hanged Man has advanced in his sequence. The main purpose of the gathering unfolds as the Hanged Man and Justice recounts the contents of 3 pages from Emperor Rosel's journal. They record the information on goat leather paper, and although written in flawed Chinese, Klein deciphers the valuable content for further study. Klein then shifted his gaze away from the 3 pages of Rosel's journal and began a conversation with the Hanged Man and Justice. Audrey proactively mentioned the reward that Klein wanted to receive. Previously, Klein, as Mr. Fool, had agreed that he would not let anyone suffer losses when carrying out tasks he assigned. The first task Mr. Fool had given to Audrey and Alger was to find the pages of Rosel's journal, and they had succeeded. Therefore, Audrey knew how to seize her rights and straightforwardly asked, "What does acting mentioned in the journal mean?" Audrey had noticed that the side effects of the potion did not affect her much, perhaps because she had acted as a spectator quite well. Immediately after Audrey's question, Klein explained the rules of using the potion simply through an example of wanting to infiltrate a heavily fortified castle. The first method was to storm in directly, but there would be many risks involved. The second method was to have an invitation card from the castle's owner to pass through the controls. However, the issue with this invitation card was that it clearly described the guest's physical characteristics and temperament, so we had to disguise ourselves and acting as an invited guest. After hearing Klein's explanation, Audrey was overjoyed, and she also proactively asked Klein what else he needed to exchange fairly. The information was far too valuable compared to a single page of a journal whose content she was unsure about. Klein then responded that he needed more pages from Rosel's journal or information about the Antigonus family. Just then, Alger spoke up, saying he wanted to pay for the information about the meaning of acting when using the potion with information about the Antigonus family as requested by Klein. Upon hearing this, Klein was incredibly eager but still tried to maintain a calm demeanor. Alger then began to share what he knew. Antigonus is an ancient family, with their history dating back to the Calamity era before the Fourth Age, related to the second Blasphemy Slate. Upon hearing about the existence of a second Blasphemy Slate alongside the first, which the Hanged Man and Justice had previously mentioned as containing the 22 pathways of the gods, Klein was astonished that something so important had 2 slates. As for the term Calamity Era, a professional like him was certainly not unfamiliar with it, as it was another name for the Third Age. Through this period of review, Klein even learned that the Third Age was divided into 2 periods, the Age of Light and the Age of Calamity. At that moment, Audrey suddenly asked, "What is the second Blasphemy Slate?" This made Klein extremely happy because, as Mr. Fool, he could not ask too many questions, as that would diminish the wisdom and mystery he had built up. After observing Klein and not seeing any refusal from him, Alger quickly shared his knowledge. The first Blasphemy Slate appeared in the Dark Age, which is the second age during which we humans struggled to survive under the protection of the deities. The second Blasphemy Slate appeared at the end of the Third Age, and it could even be said that its emergence marked the end of the Age of Calamity. Information about the 2 Blasphemy Slates is strictly confidential among the 7 churches. I only know a little that it mentions the pathways of the gods, but I'm not sure how they differ. Hearing this, Klein suddenly remembered Alger's description of the name of the potion during the first gathering, where he had said that the names of the potions of the sequences came from the Blasphemy Slate. Klein then linked this information with what Captain Dunn had once said, that the potion system was formed and completed when the Blasphemy Slate appeared. From this, it could be concluded that the pathway of the gods was indeed the pathway sequence. While Klein was digesting the crucial information about pathways that the Hanged Man had just mentioned, Justice Audrey quickly asked about the question that had been troubling her. She wanted to know whether Emperor Rosel had seen the first blasphemer or the second blasphemer. At that moment, the Hanged Man Alger replied simply and directly, "The second blasphemer." After receiving the answer, Audrey entered a state of being a spectator. She did not continue to ask questions but instead intently watched the hanged man, making him adjust his behavior and emotions to avoid revealing any information unintentionally. Once he had composed himself, Alger continued to share information about the downfall of a family. During the Solomon dynasty of the fourth epoch, the Antigonus family, although a noble lineage, was relatively unknown. It wasn't until they supported the founding of the Tudor Empire that they officially secured a central position on the stage of the northern continent. Back then, ancient names like Ammon, Abraham, and Jacob emerged brilliantly in the human realm. However, after the War of the Four Emperors, when the blood emperor of the Tudor Empire fell, the Antigonus family also plummeted from the peak and became targets of today's seven gods. The exact details are unclear, but ultimately, the Antigonus family was destroyed by the Church of the Evernight Goddess. So if you wish to know more, you'll have to approach the Church of the Evernight Goddess or seek out some ancient, mysterious organizations. Hearing the hanged man's statement trail off, as if he were certain that Mr. Fool would understand the underlying implications, caused Klein great distress. Despite his role as Mr. Fool, Klein was far from being aware of such hidden knowledge. Nonetheless, he recalled the names of groups like the Moses Ascetic Order and the Secret Order, which Captain Dunn and Old Neil had mentioned. Simultaneously, Klein thought of the secretive organization, the Psychology Alchemists. As Klein silently considered the hint, Alger added one last detail. He admitted he didn't know the pathway sequence held by the Antigonus family, only that descriptions of it consistently emphasized two words: bizarre and terrifying. Upon hearing these two words, Klein immediately connected them with the incident involving Welch and Naya, as well as the case of Ray Bieber and his mother. He had to admit that these were indeed fitting descriptions of the events that had transpired. Once Alger finished his account, Klein praised him, expressing satisfaction with the compensation he received. Additionally, Klein also tapped his fingers on the table to create a false implication that Mr. Fool had a habit of tapping his fingers. This way, his actions of activating and deactivating spirit vision wouldn't arouse suspicion. After the topic of the Antigonus family was concluded, Audrey proceeded with her second question: what is the next potion after Spectator, and where can I find clues about it? After a brief pause, Alger responded, offering the information freely as he had guided Audrey onto this path. He explained that Sequence 8 after Spectator was known as Telepathist, while Sequence 7 was Psychiatrist, knowledge he had gained from a member of the Psychology Alchemists. He believed they had various methods for creating these potions. Hearing Alger mention details of the visionary pathway she pursued, Audrey was thrilled, as these sequences perfectly matched her interests. Meanwhile, Klein was also contemplating the information about the Psychology Alchemists, considering that Spirit Medium Daily greatly admired their views, whereas Captain Dunn regarded them as dangerous. Audrey then asked where she might find members of the Psychology Alchemists from whom Alger had obtained the information. Alger stated bluntly that he had drowned the man himself near Sonia Island, and made it clear that any lead to the Psychology Alchemists had disappeared. Alger could divulge this secret without fearing exposure because he was confident that Justice wouldn't know information that only he, the person involved, could be aware of. Alger's cold-blooded response left Audrey stunned, so she refrained from asking more about the Psychology Alchemists and moved on to another question. She wondered what would happen if a regular animal consumed a Sequence 9 potion. Both Mr. Fool and the Hanged Man were shocked, as such a scenario seemed impossible. However, Alger quickly composed himself and explained, normal animals lack the human-like thinking necessary to learn cogitation, so they would typically die immediately or transform into monsters. But if they somehow withstood the potion, they could become beyonder creatures. If the potion enhanced their thinking capabilities, they might even become more intelligent. After receiving the answer, Audrey had no further questions. As for Alger, he didn't wish to reveal information about the Aurora Order and the listener, so he remained silent, waiting for Mr. Fool to speak. Klein, as Mr. Fool, then spoke up, saying he needed their assistance. Using spirit vision, Klein noticed that this made the Hanged Man and Justice tense and anxious. He reassured them that, if successful, this would benefit both of them. He mentioned his plan to conduct some experiments and mentioned that they could excuse themselves if they had something to do and couldn't make the gathering at 3 p.m. on Monday. Hearing this, Alger immediately asked how they could inform him if something unexpected came up. Without keeping the Hanged Man and Justice waiting, Klein described a ritual he had modified from the Luck Exchange ritual, and he also taught Justice, free of charge, how to create a spirit space. When you have free time, conduct the ritual in a space where you won't be disturbed. Place 4 candles at the corners of an altar, preferably scented with sandalwood. Place white bread on the top left, a bowl of fine-bought noodles at the bottom right candle, seafood rice at the bottom left, and a hot dipsy cake at the bottom right. Use a silver knife to create an enclosed spirit space. Mix distilled water with essential oils extracted from moonlight flowers, silver peppermint, deep sleep flowers, golden citrus, and lava roses, and drop 1 drop on each candle. Although the description of the ritual was incredibly detailed and somewhat complicated, deep down, Klein thought that the step of offering specific foods to please the corresponding being could be skipped. After all, the being whom the hanged man and justice were supposed to please was none other than Klein himself. After hearing about the ritual, Alger asked what incantation should be recited. Klein calmly responded in the ancient Hermes language, "O Mr. Fool who does not belong to this era, you are the Lord of Mysteries above the grey fog, you are the King of Yellow and Black who wields good luck." Upon hearing the ancient Hermes incantation from Mr. Fool, Audrey was utterly astonished. Being fond of the occult, Audrey had secretly gathered with like-minded nobles to learn Hermes worship rituals even before she was drawn into the grey fog. While none of the rituals they had attempted had any tangible effect, Audrey had gained some understanding of how incantations were formulated. Thus, she knew that the 3 descriptions uttered by Mr. Fool were equivalent to those used to represent the deities of the 7 gods in other rituals. It signified that these gods were overseeing the entire world, placing Mr. Fool almost on par with the Crimson Master, Mother of Mystery, Queen of Calamity and Fear. While feeling similarly shocked and awed, Alger, with his extensive knowledge, considered deeper implications. Perhaps Mr. Fool is some ancient, enigmatic, and fearsome entity who has chosen not to reveal his true name or appearance to us. Possibly a primordial demoness, hidden sage, or true creator worshipped by multiple mysterious cults. Because if Mr. Fool's ritual connects to him, allowing him to receive our prayers, then he must indeed be a god, worthy of being addressed with third-person honorifics, like any divine being or similar existence. Alger also understood that the figure before them wasn't Mr. Fool's true form, increasing his respect for this mysterious being. He was relieved that he hadn't done anything too reckless when he previously tested Mr. Fool's abilities. Naturally, Klein was pleased with how the hanged man and justice reacted, as it fit perfectly with the image he wanted to portray as the enigmatic Mr. Fool. After Klein recited the incantation and blessings, Audrey memorized it quickly, while Alger carefully recorded it. Once Klein confirmed they understood the ritual steps, he suggested they complete it by Wednesday at the latest. Klein made this request because he worried that he wouldn't be able to distinguish whether they were genuinely requesting time off or testing the ritual. To avoid confusion during the gathering, he wanted them to experiment beforehand so that they could all verify its effectiveness together on Thursday. The hanged man and justice both agreed to Mr. Fool's request without hesitation. Next, Klein took the initiative, saying, according to the hanged man's previous suggestion, it's time for some casual conversation after official matters. Who wants to go first? Audrey immediately spoke up, sharing her recent experiences. Sir, the proposal to hold a competitive selection for administrative positions has been well received by many members of Parliament, and it might be implemented. However, given the government's efficiency, the earliest possible date is at least 6 months from now. When she mentioned this development, Audrey wasn't worried that the hanged man could use it to investigate her identity. She had subtly led high society ladies to believe that the idea came from their superior intellects, so she would never be recognized as the originator. This clever manipulation to influence the kingdom's affairs made Audrey feel accomplished, as though she had found a way for a spectator to shape the play's plot. Once Audrey finished, it was Alger's turn. Before speaking, Alger glanced at Klein, hinting that his information might also relate to Klein. In recent decades, the activities of secret organizations have been increasing, and new groups have emerged with substantial beyonder power. Klein understood that the hanged man was probing whether he belonged to any secret organization, but he knew that Alger would be disappointed since Klein had not yet interacted with any. After the conversation ended, Klein made a cutting gesture to sever the connection with the Crimson Star, watching as the hanged man and justice faded from the Grand Palace.